Okay, I know, I'll grant you, I just know this is going to be a longer video, but that's because this is a very long article, and it's interesting because when I read through it the first time, I'm not against the article. I thought when I started out that it was just going to be a hit piece, and it seems like it almost tries to be a hit piece, but doesn't end up that way, and I can't tell if it's intentional or not, but maybe as I read through it this time and really dissect it, we'll get a better idea of what it is. But this was on the front page of the New York Times. One just kind of a thing on alternative media, and I just want to take a moment to look at this thumbnail image they used that was on the cover of the New York Times, like the paper version. And it's just I'm trying to figure out where they got these pictures from. The interesting thing, like why did they pick specifically these pictures? Because I understand a lot of them. Like if you wanted to make a collage of alternative media, this is a decent way of doing it. You got most of these covered rather well, but it's just there's a bit of just peculiarities about it. So you see like some obvious ones. Dave Rubin, it's starting top left or to right, and then top to bottom. We got Dave Rubin, Alex Jones. I think that's Coach Red Pill, Stefan Molyneux in that classic picture. I don't know who that woman is, but the other guy's Dr. Random or Cam, which I don't watch him, but I think he does politics. But I don't know if I'd really consider him anywhere that close to any of these previous of the first four people. Especially considering you can see from the picture right there, he's a bit different from the rest. I think that's Ben Shapiro next line. I'm not sure who that second guy is. Lauren Southern, Stefan Molyneux again, Milo Yiannopoulos on the Rubin Report, Jordan Peterson, Philip DeFranco, which is interesting because a lot of people lump Phil DeFranco into this group, but a lot of people also don't. Like he's kind of on the edges there. So it's just interesting that how he kind of straddles that line rather well. Then for some reason Stefan Molyneux a third time, which is just like I don't know, it just seems weird about the like three times. The next one, I think that's Jimmy Fallon and Shia LaBeouf. I think I'm not positive, but that's a picture that I'm not entirely sure why they threw that in there. But that one just stands out as confusing. I don't know. But then Lauren Southern, I think that's Bill Whittle. Not sure who the last guy is, but I know I've seen him before somewhere. I'm not sure who the green girl is on the next line or the woman after her. We got Milton Friedman. That one after Friedman looks like just kind of some kind of stock photo. Maybe not. I'm not sure. There's, I think, Faith Goldie and Lauren Southern again. Then Gavin McGinnis once more. Then Big Man Tyrone. I don't watch his channel, but he seems pretty hilarious. Then Tommy Robinson with someone else. And then Dave Cullen. Gavin McGinnis again. JF. I'm sure that next one is Crowder as Trump. Which just this is unusual because that's you have a stock photo thrown in there. So I'm wondering if it seems like a lot of these they're just taking thumbnail images, and maybe that's what they're doing. Maybe this whole thing is just thumbnail images of certain videos. That's the only thing I can really make sense out of it because of the weird images there that don't really seem to fit. Again, Paul Joseph Watson again, Crowder again, Sargon and Anita Sarkeesian. Not sure who that next person is, but that looks like Jordan Peterson. That tiny from a distance picture. Dave Cohen and Call to Dusty, and then Jordan Peterson again. So overall, there's just some weird, odd ones out. The whole reason I went through each one was just because there's some odd. I find the image is so interesting. It's a collage of a bunch of different images, and I guess they're thumbnails. That's all I can see what some of these odd one outs have in common. Perhaps they're just thumbnail images, but I just found that interesting. But anyways, to continue, actually we'll read the first thing. Caleb Kane, because that's what this article is about. It's like a summary of an interview with this guy specifically. Caleb Kane was a college dropout looking for direction. He turned to YouTube. Soon he was pulled into a far-right universe, watching thousands of videos filled with conspiracy theories, misogyny, and racism. I was brainwashed, he said. So I've seen these before. Like the article's called "The Making of a YouTube Radical." Dun dun dun. And I've seen these before where they take the article about one guy who was interested in the right wing and then watched a bunch of their stuff and then became left wing somehow. And usually they're used as hit pieces to talk about how awful it was that he was indoctrinated and then he saw the light. Which, I mean, let's be honest, there's a lot of that on both sides. I've noticed it seems like a lot of people, in my opinion, it seems like a lot of people are moving from the left to the right. But that could just be my own bias, my own echo chamber. That I do see on occasion a lot of people, so the occasional person does move from the right to the left. They're aware of everything the right is saying, and yet yet anyway, they decide to move to the left, which I find interesting. That's something that you can't just dismiss. You have to acknowledge why that is. So we'll zoom in a bit here. Caleb Kane. Oh, jeez. Caleb Kane pulled a Glock pistol from his waistband, took out the magazine, and casually tossed both onto the kitchen counter. I bought it the day after I got death threats, he said. The threats, Mr. Kane explained, came from the right-wing trolls in response to a video I posted on YouTube a few days earlier. In the video, he told the story of how, as a liberal college dropout, struggling to find his place in the world, he gotten sucked into a vortex of far-right politics on YouTube. I fell down the alt-right rabbit hole, he said in the video. Mr. Kane, 26, recently swore off the alt-right nearly 5 years after discovering it and has become a vocal critic of the movement. He is scarred by his experience of being radicalized by what he calls a decentralized cult of far-right YouTube personalities who convinced him that Western civilization was under threat from Muslim immigrants and cultural Marxists, that innate IQ differences explain racial disparities, and that feminism was a dangerous ideology. Now, the interesting thing is that even though I don't know if this is his own words, because that's kind of an issue of reading an article about an interview rather than listening to an actual interview. But I do kind of find it interesting how even though this guy is fully aware of the stuff, of like exactly the nuances of the terms, the New York Times still does refer to pretty much everyone in the picture above as far right, which is of course inaccurate. Again, it's not even subjectively inaccurate in the sense of like. Some people might find them like farther right than they are, or whatever. But it is an objectively inaccurate term because there are, of those people on that list, loads of them hold views that aren't that different from like the centrists. A lot of them hold moderate opinions. It's just that some of them go a bit towards the extremes, but I would not call them extremists. I honestly would not call them extremists, especially considering how popular their views are becoming, how it's not that radical. I'm going to zoom in a bit more here. There we go. But so I do find it interesting that even then they still misuse all these terms. So I don't know if it's the guy that's misusing the terms. I doubt it is. I think it's just the person who wrote the article. I just kept falling deeper and deeper into this, and it appealed to me because it made me feel a sense of belonging. He said, I was brainwashed. Now, that is something granted. Like, why do people watch a ton of politics videos on YouTube? To get a sense of belonging, a sense of purpose. That is something that if you're spending your life watching videos on YouTube, as I spend probably too much time doing, I'll admit that like it's not a life purpose. That's not a job. It's not it doesn't make your life better. It's something that it's good to be informed. I'm interested in these topics. It's something that I find entertaining and that I like learning about. But it's not like I've seen a lot of people kind of devote, like this guy seemed here, to where he didn't have much to do, so he devoted his life to watching a lot of YouTube content. And overall, it's like, yeah, nothing against watching YouTube content, but there is that aspect. There is granted that aspect of people that, just like any hobby out there at all, they get obsessed. Sometimes they get a bit too obsessed. And it seems like this guy was a bit too obsessed. Over years of reporting on internet culture, I've heard countless versions of Mr. Kane's story. An aimless young man, usually white, frequently interested in video games. There's the Gamergate reference. Visits YouTube looking for direction or distraction and is seduced by a community of far-right commentators. There's that term again. Some young men discover far-right videos by accident while others seek them out. Some travel all the way to neo-Nazism while others stop at milder forms of bigotry. Now that's interesting because, again, they have established that pretty much all the people listed above are bigots because even if they're not neo-Nazis, the people that watch the like the content above, the content in the thumbnail is still a mild form of bigotry, which is pretty much false, to be honest. Like I watch a lot of these people. It's not bigotry. Maybe, who knows? I mean, I'm just saying maybe it's entirely possible that in a few years I will be submitting another request to the New York Times to write about my own story of how I got brainwashed and then I got better. But I just don't think that's going to happen. The common thread in many of these stories is YouTube and its recommendation algorithm, the software that determines which videos appear on users' homepage and inside the up next sidebar next to a video that is playing. The algorithm is responsible for more than 70% of all time spent on the site. The radicalization of young men is driven by a complex stew of emotional, economic, and political elements, many having nothing to do with social media, but critics and independent researchers say YouTube has inadvertently created a dangerous on-ramp to extremism by combining two things: a business model that rewards provocative videos with exposure and advertising dollars, and an algorithm that guides users down personalized paths meant to keep them glued to their screens. Now, granted, there are criticisms of the YouTube algorithm, not just in the direct, especially the changes they made recently in terms of borderline content. But there are certainly criticisms of not just Facebook, but all kinds of not just YouTube, but of Facebook and other kinds of social media. that essentially say it does promote echo chambers. It does say, okay, if you like, it promotes what you're more willing to like. It's the goal is to get you to watch more YouTube, to click on more Facebook links, and all that stuff. The goal is to get you to interact. And to do that, it figures instead of putting up challenging ideas or to change things up, it does put you more of what you want. So it's easy to get stuck in an echo chamber because, I mean, again, you're more likely to like things that you already agree with, and that's how social media responds. And that's an issue. I'll grant it, yeah, that. As for does Facebook and YouTube and that have any obligation to stop that, that's a whole different question. But I will fully admit, like, there is a problem with creating echo chambers and how the algorithm does create echo chambers. I'll fully admit that. Though, as they address later in the article, it is worth pointing out that a lot of people have figured out how to reverse that, how to game the system, how a lot of the way YouTubers are doing things now is if you want to talk about someone, like, if you search someone's name in a feed, like if you search Sargon's name or whatever in a feed, you're going to get Sargon's videos, but you're also going to get people that call him out, that criticize him in that. And same thing with the topic of, just say, feminism, for example. If you search feminism, you'll get all these anti-feminists, but you'll also get a bunch of pro-feminists, and you'll get a bunch of people responding to other people's videos in that. So it does, by searching for a certain topic, there is a wide variety of different videos, of different perspectives there, which is nice. There's a Crowder thing. There's a spectrum on YouTube between the calm section, the Walter Cronkite, Carl Sagan part, and Crazy Town, where the extreme stuff is, said Tristan Harris, a former design ethicist at Google, YouTube's parent company. If I'm YouTube and I want you to watch more, I'm always going to steer you towards Crazy Town. And that's true. Like, it does promote you kind of going further and further down the rabbit hole. Again, I'm not suggesting they change that, but I just want to point it out. And there's a quote from one of Crowder's one of Crowder's comedy routines, making fun of Schoolhouse Rock. In recent years, social media platforms have grappled with the growth of extremism on their services. Many platforms have barred a handful of far-right influencers and conspiracy theorists, including Alex Jones of InfoWars, and tech companies have taken steps to limit the spread of political misinformation. And of course, far-right is such a vague term that I don't like using it at all because it's vague. What does that mean? Is Alex Jones far-right? Well, does he peddle a lot of crazy conspiracy theories? Yes. Is that how you define the far right? Okay, then by that definition, he is the far right. But then when you also think of the far right, you think neo-Nazism, Holocaust denial, and is that Alex Jones? Not at all. Like, people call him a Zionist shill. Whenever he talks about Israel, if you go through the comments, well, actually he can't anymore because his YouTube channel is deleted, but back then, if you look through any of the comments on a video whenever he talked about Israel, it's just all people calling him a Zionist shill and controlled opposition and stuff like that. So just keep in mind that the far right, the extremists, really do not seem to like him. YouTube, whose rules prohibit hate speech and harassment, took a more laissez-faire approach to enforcement for years, which I think is overall a pretty good thing. There are downsides, again, to, like I said, enforcing echo chambers and that, but hey, overall it's still pretty decent system. Just let it run the way it did. The past week, the company announced that it was updating its policy to ban videos espousing neo-Nazism, white supremacy, and other bigoted views. The company also said it was changing its recommendation algorithm to reduce the spread of misinformation and conspiracy theories. And I have a great issue with this because notice how in the past they took issues to how do we get people to watch more videos? How do we get people to watch more content, to engage with our stuff more? How do we get more watch time and more views? That's what YouTube was all about. And now it's specifically taking the approach of, okay, how do we take this group of viewpoints and make them less popular? And I have an issue with that. I have an issue with saying, okay, all of these different political views are using our site. How do we make these ones less popular? I don't like that approach to that. And granted, you could say, are you really fine with why do you have an issue with YouTube limiting the presence of neo-Nazism, white supremacy, and things? Well, I mean, more it's just the principled approach of, like, I don't like censoring even people I hate, but I'm more concerned about the and other bigoted views section, because they have already established earlier in this article that the people like Steven Crowder and Gavin McInnes and Lauren Southern and Dave Rubin, and they even include Shapiro and a few other people like that I'm not even sure seem to fit on there, but they included these people as bigoted. They said milder bigotry. So they're including that. They're including these people there, which is just, it's ridiculous. It's completely overblown, which is why YouTube had to switch to their borderline policy now. Like, they're talking about limiting borderline videos, because honestly, it's like you can't get away with calling Steven Crowder a Nazi, so you have to call him borderline now, because you've gone too far. You've gone too far towards the center to where most people aren't going to believe you anymore. So you have to come up with a new word like borderline to say, okay, he's not dangerous, or he's not a Nazi, but he's borderline Nazi, or he's borderline hateful. Therefore, we have to step in. With 2 billion monthly active users uploading more than 500 hours of video every minute, which, just think about that for a second, 500 brand new hours of video every minute. That's crazy. YouTube's traffic is estimated to be the second highest of any website, behind only Google.com, and they're both the same company. According to the Pew Research Center, 94% of Americans ages 18 to 24 use YouTube, a higher percentage than for any other online service. Like many like many Silicon Valley companies, YouTube is outwardly liberal in its corporate policies, so at least it admits that. I've seen a lot of people say, like, no, YouTube's not left-wing. Like, doesn't have a left-wing bias. It sponsors floats at LGBT pride parades and celebrates diverse creators, and its chief executive endorsed Hillary Clinton in the 2016 presidential election. President Trump and other conservatives have claimed that YouTube and other social media networks are biased against right-wing views, and have used takedowns like those announced by YouTube on Wednesday as evidence for those claims. And I think it is pretty blatant now, right? Like, they said other bigoted views, and they included, or at least the article itself included, more generic right-wing content. As well as, they said the borderline thing now. They're going to start blocking borderline videos. And I think that is, like, outright bias. In reality, YouTube has been a godsend for hyperpartisans on all sides. And that is also true. You have to remember that as well. That YouTube, like, imagine if YouTube didn't exist. Alternative media would not have a presence. So that is something to remember with YouTube. Like, overall, it has given a platform to, like, all of alternative media, whether you're a Marxist or alt-right or whatever, or anywhere in between. And that's a good thing. That's something to keep in mind. That I think it's good that all these views are getting out there. It has allowed them to bypass traditional gatekeepers and broadcast their views to mainstream audiences, and has helped once obscure commentators build lucrative media businesses. And that's great. What it has essentially done is lower the barrier to entry. Before, you had to have all of these resources and all this money to enter the market of, like, broadcasting your views out there. And now you can just do it on YouTube. That was YouTube's, I'm not even sure if that's still YouTube's logo, or YouTube's motto, but YouTube's old motto was broadcast yourself. It has also been a useful recruiting tool for far-right extremist groups. Bellingcat, an investigative news site, never heard of that before, analyzed messages from far-right chat rooms and found that YouTube was cited as the most frequent cause of members red-pilling, an internet slang term for converting to far-right beliefs. That's not exactly true. Red-pilling is becoming woke, essentially, being anti-feminist, anti-SJW. So, again, like, if you're someone that watches Jordan Peterson, you use and that's it. That's as far right as you go is to Jordan Peterson. You'll still probably use the term "I've been red-pilled," and so that's something that I do have to question Bellingcat. I don't have time to look into the study. Maybe that'll be a separate video. If you want a separate video on that and you're interested, let me know in the comment section. If not, I'll assume not. But maybe I'll look through it anyway, because when they say, like, far right chat rooms, it's like, well, what's a far right chat room? I need these definitions here because, again, you're including all these people that do not hold bigoted extremist views in putting them all into one group. A European research group, Voxpol, conducted a separate analysis of nearly 30,000 Twitter accounts affiliated with the alt-right. And that's rather interesting. They say affiliated with the alt-right. So where's the connection there again? And how do you define alt-right? Like, is alt-right and far-right synonymous? Is alt-right even further right than is it just a part of the far? I don't know. It all depends how you define these terms here, because I don't understand how they're defining them. Because the media and someone that's actually part of the alt-right, or someone that's part of the, like, alternative, there's the term alt-light that went around for a bit. There's loads of different definitions here. People can't agree on one definition. So as far as I can tell from my definition, alt-right has always been like white nationalist. In that sense, at the very least, like, that's the limiting the pro-ethno-state seems to be the definition of alt-right in my sense. It found that the accounts linked to YouTube more often than to any other site. YouTube has been able to fly under the radar because until recently, no one thought of it as a place where radicalization is happening, said Becca Lewis, who studies online extremism for the nonprofit Data and Society. And if you're not aware of who Rebecca Lewis is, she's the one that wrote the Alternative Influence Network report, which is pretty much just a giant paper of guilt by association of, oh, this is how Joe Rogan is promoting the far right, or how Joe Rogan is leading people to far right extremism and stuff like that. It's a ridiculous report. It looks like a conspiracy theorist just put up, or one of the crazy people put up all the dots on the board, all the thumbtacks, and then they connect them with all the yarn and make all these connections that and look insane. It's like that image, that meme of Charlie from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, just looking nuts because he's gone nuts on the conspiracy route. But it's where young people are getting their information and entertainment, and it's a space where creators are broadcasting political content that, at times, is overtly white supremacist. Now, that last part is pretty much true. At times is overtly white supremacist, but I gotta be honest, like, it's not that white supremacist, considering, if you look at the research, really, you'll find that tons of people, like these people, I will grant you that, people that watch Jordan Peterson and Stefan Molyneux especially, and Lawrence Southern and like Dave Rubin, and that they're being, well, not necessarily Dave Rubin actually, but all these other people, they're being exposed to far-right content. I will totally admit that. There are so many like far-right, alt-right, white, like, I didn't know who Jared Taylor was like 2 years ago. I know who he is now. And people like, again, Richard Spencer was the big one, although he became famous because he got punched, not because of alternative media. But there are all these people that are genuinely like white nationalists and that, and I've become familiar with them through the alternative media. But what you'll find is most people are like me in that they watch their stuff, they get introduced to the far right, and then they reject it. And they're like, no, this stuff is, some people accept it, but most people reject it. And I think that's a good thing. That's a good sign. And as you'll find, that this article literally, I thought this article points out that he never got into the crazy alt-right stuff. He rejected it. Like, that was a weird plot twist at the end that, oh, turns out this guy, like, actually, like, rejected the far right. I visited Mr. Kane in West Virginia after seeing his YouTube video denouncing the far right. We spent hours discussing his radicalization. To back up his recollections, he downloaded and sent me his entire YouTube history, a log of more than 12,000 videos and more than 2,500 search queries dating back to 2015. These interviews and data points form a picture of a disillusioned young man, an internet-savvy group of right-wing reactionaries, and a powerful algorithm that learns to connect the two. It suggests that YouTube may have played a role in steering Mr. McCain and others like young men like him toward the far-right fringes. But then you'll also notice that the YouTube algorithm did the opposite too. It brought him back. So it really does feel like the article is trying to make the point that YouTube is responsible and therefore needs to take more action on stopping the far right. And I disagree with that, honestly. It's down to I think if you're someone that's creating a platform, what you need to do is create a platform and let it go. I mean, obviously you can make changes to the algorithm, and if you want to try to take a stab at reducing the likelihood of getting caught in echo chambers, then sure. Maybe you could, like, with all the research you're putting into trying to perfect your algorithm, you could certainly like figure out how to make it to where maybe people see alternative views more. But it's obviously one-sided in this approach. They're not concerned about getting rid of echo chambers and that. They're concerned specifically with removing what they deem far right, which, again, seems to include everyone up to, as most recently, Steven Crowder. These interviews and data points form a picture of a oh, I already read this. It also just suggests that, in time, YouTube is capable of steering them in very different directions, which, interesting, like, isn't that something worth pointing out? That some people go one way, some people go the other way, and I think that's a good thing. Here are the number of political videos Kane watched each month. So we're just going to skip through this here, but as far as I know, the red is the right-wing content. The purple is the intellectual dark web stuff, which is more Dave Rubin, Joe Rogan. Oh, it actually says right there, Dave Rubin and Joe Rogan. And I think more like what the Weinstein brothers, stuff like that. More intellectual dark web, more centrist content generally. And during 2017, Mr. Kane began watching more videos from left-wing channels, and that is the blue here. Which actually, it's noticeably interesting here how he went from right-wing videos to, over time, more and more left-wing videos. Then, the beginning of 2018, it was like all left-wing videos. And then the very next month, back all the way up to the right. So I just find that interesting how they worked. But from an early age, Mr. Kane was fascinated by internet culture. As a teenager, he browsed 4chan, the lawless message board. He played online games with his friends and devoured videos of intellectuals debating charged topics like the existence of God. So this guy's watching debates on God and stuff. Like, okay, I fail to see the issue there. The internet was an escape. Mr. Kane grew up in post-industrial Appalachia and was raised by his Christian conservative grandparents. He was smart, but shy and socially awkward, and he carved out an identity during high school as a countercultural punk. He went to community college, but dropped out after 3 semesters. Broken depressed, he resolved to get his act together. He began looking for help in the same place he looked for everything: YouTube. One day in 2014, YouTube recommended a self-help video by Stefan Molyneux, a Canadian talk show host and self-styled philosopher. Actually, the interesting thing is, of all the possible ways they could have characterized Stefan Molyneux, that is, I wouldn't really necessarily say talk show host, but that's probably the most charitable interpretation of him I have ever seen from the mainstream media. So good for them, I guess. Like Mr. McCain, Mr. Molyneux had a difficult childhood, and he talked about overcoming hardships through self-improvement. He seems smart and passionate, and he wrestled with big questions like free will, along with practical advice on topics like dating and job interviews. Mr. Molyneux, who described himself as an ANCAP, also had a political agenda. He was a men's rights advocate who said that feminism was a form of socialism and that progressive gender politics were holding young men back. He offered conservative commentary, and we're going to go through more stuff on Molyneux. He was willing to address young men's issues directly in a way I'd never heard before, Mr. Cain said. In 2015 and 2016, Mr. Cain dived deeper into his YouTube recommendations. He discovered an entire universe of right-wing creators. Here's a 48-hour snapshot of what Cain watched in 2015. So, what do we got here? I went through this before. For some reason, my mouse doesn't like this, the way it works. So, Molyneux video. Also Molyneux video. Molyneux. Feminism lol. Which notice interesting how that video is unavailable. Mercedes Carrera, who I think is a porn star. I can't see what that one says because they decided to put this thing in the way, which says a 2-day sample of Mr. Cain's YouTube history shows how steeped he was in far-right commentary from creators like Stefan Molyneux and Paul Joseph Watson. Now, granted, Stefan Molyneux has shifted quite to the right in recent years, especially. Like, he used to talk about like ANCAP philosophy and a lot more like self-help stuff in this very beginning, and then has shifted more to like more racial genetic stuff. And not even commenting on that's good or bad, but I will fully say, like, now I'm at that point where, like, mistakenly calling Stefan Molyneux alt-right, I'm not as critical of, because, like, let's be perfectly honest, that's the topics he talks about. So at that point, and that's not even an insult to him, I like his content. But saying Paul Joseph Watson's alt-right, again, that's just not accurate. Again, I still can't see what that says. Oh, that says Fox News. Fox News. Same topic about suicide caught on live TV. Paul Joseph Watson. Music. Whoops. Paul Joseph Watson. Karen Strawn with Gad Sad. Paul Joseph Watson with Lauren Southern. Fiamengo File. Janice Fiamengo, I think her name is. I've heard of her, but I don't know. I think she's like a kind of like a Christina Hoff Sommers, maybe. I'm not sure. Thunderfoot, which again isn't exactly a far-right content creator. Unknown, because that video must have been deleted. Paul Joseph Watson. Sandman, which is apparently something MGTOW, which is like a men going their own way thing. Okay, here's Paul Joseph Watson video. Now we can figure out where they got that thumbnail from in the beginning. And like the very beginning thing, which again, why would you pick that? It just seems strange to kind of take a thumbnail that doesn't have any right-wing commentator and throw that into the... But that thumbnail is so weird to me, like how they came up with those. Paul Joseph Watson, which they picked the same video again. Honey Badger Radio. Syrian Girl Partisan, which I've heard of her, but car videos on Teslas and that. Alex Jones channel, Paul Joseph Watson, and unknown. So overall, nothing too radical, to be honest. I didn't see any Jared Taylor on there. Over time, he watched dozens of clips by Steven Crowder, a conservative comedian, Paul Joseph Watson, a prominent right-wing conspiracy theorist who was barred by Facebook this year. He became entranced by Lauren Southern, a far-right Canadian activist, whom he started referring to as Fashy Bay or Fascist Crutch, which... I can't believe they let him publish that, or like he let the New York Times publish that, because to me that's just embarrassing. Like, that's just a bit cringy, to be honest. These people weren't all shouty demagogues. They were entertainers, building their audience with satirical skits, debates, and interviews with like-minded creators. Some of them were part of the alt-right, a loose cohort of pro-Trump activists who sandwich white nationalism between layers of internet sarcasm. So, right here, we get a definition of alt-right. They have said, in their definition of alt-right, they sandwich white nationalism between layers of internet sarcasm. Others merely consider them alt-right or merely anti-progressive. So, to be alt-right means to be white nationalist. We'll have to keep that in mind. And the interesting thing is they're referring to this group of, like, that they've labeled far-right multiple times as anti-progressive, as someone that is merely anti-progressive. So I just find that Interesting, their choice of words there. These creators were active on Facebook and Twitter, but YouTube was their headquarters and the place where they could earn a living by hawking merchandise and getting a cut of the money spent on advertisements that accompany their videos. Few of them had overt ties to establishment conservative groups, and there was little talk about tax cuts or trade policy on their channels. Instead, they rallied around issues like free speech and anti-feminism, portraying themselves as truth-telling rebels doing battle against humorless social justice warriors. Their videos felt like episodes in a long-running soap opera with a constant stream of new heroes and villains. Yes, I will. That's honestly pretty much true. That's not really different from any other sort of media. I just want to point that out. But it is pretty much, and that is something I don't really like. I try to focus on channels that talk more about, like they said, tax cuts or trade policy, things that talk more about ideas and issues and stuff, and talk less about like the news of the day kind of stuff. I just don't like the constant, like, I'll admit that that's something that kind of hurts me, and that everyone else is like, did you hear about this? Did you hear about this? Make a video on this. And I've never heard of that. I'm busy watching things that aren't really news related. To Mr. Kane, all of this felt like forbidden knowledge, as if just by watching some YouTube videos, he had been let into an exclusive club. And I think that says a lot. That's something to their credit, that notice how a big rise of alternative media was that there was a demand for that stuff. There was a demand for this content that people knew something was up, but they didn't really know what was up. And then they found these content creators and like, wow, they're making a lot of good points. I like these people. So they started watching them. And they filled a gap pretty much. If alienation was one ingredient in Mr. Kane's radicalization and persuasive partisans like Mr. Molyneux were another, the third was a series of product decisions YouTube made starting back in 2012. In March that year, YouTube's engineers made an update to the site's recommendations algorithm. For years, the algorithm had been programmed to maximize views by showing users videos they were likely to click on. But creators had learned to game the system, inflating their views by posting images with exaggerated titles or choosing salacious thumbnail images. In response, YouTube's executives announced that the recommendation algorithm would give more weight to watch time rather than views. That way, creators would be encouraged to make videos that users would finish, users will be more satisfied, and YouTube would be able to show them more ads. And I think that's honestly pretty great. Like, I like that idea that YouTube focuses on minutes watched, not views. So that means that when someone clicks on my video, I don't care. Like, it doesn't really help me at all if they click on my video and then click away 10 seconds later. It really does. Like, the view count does not help my videos at all. What does help is minutes watched. Like, how much of this video do they actually watch? So it is kind of interesting how it is in my interest to not only make longer videos. So again, more videos or longer videos means more watch time of the people that watch those videos to the end. But then again, it also means that I got to get to the point, which I know I have a problem doing. I got to get straight to the point. I got to keep this informative. I can't get that boring or people will click away, and that does hurt me. So it's not just, it's about not only getting people to watch your videos, but to keep them watching, because minutes watched counts. And I think that's a benefit. However, the only downside to that is, and I think the downside is nothing compared to the upsides, but the downside is that a lot of people, this was something with gaming videos. Like, the reason gaming videos became so popular was because you have someone that puts out like a high quality 3-minute video that's only going to get so many views. Even if it's really great, even if it gets 1 million views, it's only 1 million views. And now if you have someone 1 million views for 3-minute videos, and then you have someone like these gamers who upload I don't know, like a 15 or 30-minute video every single day, or maybe even more than that, of them playing games in that. They constantly upload. Like, all they have to do is play a game for 10 minutes, record themselves for 10 minutes, end the video, upload the video, and that's pretty much it. Maybe do, I don't know, like thumbnails or whatever. But that was the thing with a lot of the gaming videos, that the gaming videos produce so much content. It was so easy to produce that content that it really, like, gamed the system. It really boosted the algorithm, because they didn't have to get that many viewers. They just had to get viewers that kept watching their stuff. And that really helped them out. In response, YouTube's executives announced that the recommended algorithm would give more weight to watch time rather than... Oh, I already read that. The bet paid off. Within weeks of the algorithm change, the company reported that overall watch time was growing, even as the number of views shrank. According to a 2017 report, YouTube's watch time grew 50% a year for 3 consecutive years. A month after its algorithm tweak, YouTube changed its rules to allow all video creators to run ads alongside their videos and earn a portion of the revenue they generated. Previously, only popular channels that had been vetted by YouTube were able to run ads. And that is an interesting thing. Like, I kind of wonder if maybe it was always beneficial for them to wait. Like, you had to reach, say, maybe, I think right now the threshold's 1,000. But it would have been nicer maybe if you had to have 50,000, 100,000 subscribers before you could put on ads. because that would be less of an that would be less fearful for the advertisers that may be like, hey, we know that the people that are watching the people that your ads are showing up on, they've got 100,000 subscribers, 50,000 subscribers. They've got enough that they are at least, they might not be great content, they're popular at the very least. So that filters out all the things that might really scare away advertisers. Neither of these changes were intended to benefit the far right, and YouTube's algorithm had no inherent preference for extreme political content. It treated a white nationalist monologue no differently from an Ariana Grande cover or a cake icing tutorial, which I think is rather a great thing. I honestly don't mind that at all. But the far right was well positioned to capitalize on the changes. Many right-wing creators already made long video essays or posted video versions of their podcasts. Their inflammatory messages, lame, were more engaging than mild or fair, and now that they could earn money from their videos, they had a financial incentive to churn out as much material as possible. A few progressive YouTube channels flourished from 2012 to 2016, but they were dwarfed by creators on the right who had developed an intuitive feel for the way YouTube's platform worked and were better able to tap into an emerging wave of right-wing populism. Yes, that is true. There's a few things in mind. Like, for one, that if the left is the mainstream, like the mainstream, you have Fox News, granted, on the right, but there is a significant difference between Fox News and this alternative media on the right. So this is a new outlet. This is something that is not addressed anywhere in the mainstream. So there are people demanding that. There are people demanding this kind of content, and YouTube provided it. Whereas if you're a progressive, you might be fine with a lot of the content on YouTube. You might, or on the mainstream TV. You might be fine with MSNBC. But not so much with the YouTube stuff. Like, there's less of a demand for YouTube content. And I will admit, there is a difference nowadays between the YouTube content on, like, the leftist YouTube content and the stuff you find on CNN and MSNBC, and that there are a decent number of left-wing YouTubers that are genuinely interested in discussing ideas, and I think that's a great thing. Several current and former YouTube employees who would speak only on the condition of anonymity because they had signed confidentiality agreements said company leaders were obsessed with increasing engagement during those years. I can hardly blame them. The executives, the people said, rarely considered whether the company's algorithms were fueling the spread of extreme and hateful political content. I think it's fine, honestly. Like, I don't fear the rise of, but I don't fear that much as I fear the idea of a company saying, okay, we are going to specifically target and reduce certain political views. Guillermo Chaslot, whose name I probably butchered, a former YouTube engineer who has since become a critic of the company's recommendation system, said this year that YouTube's algorithms were designed to increase the time people spent online because it leads to more ads. In 2015, a research team from Google Brain, YouTube's much-lauded artificial intelligence division, began rebuilding YouTube's recommendation system around neural networks, a type of AI that mimics the human brain. Interesting. In a 2017 interview with The Verge, a YouTube executive said that the new algorithm was capable of drawing users deeper into the platform by figuring out how adjacent relationships between videos that a human would never identify. The new algorithm worked well, but it wasn't perfect. One problem, according to several of the current and former YouTube employees, is that the AI tended to pigeonhole YouTube users into specific niches, recommending videos that were similar to ones they had already watched. Eventually, users got bored. Google Brain's researchers wondered if they could keep YouTube users engaged for longer by steering them into different parts of YouTube rather than feeding their existing interests. And they began testing a new algorithm that incorporated a different type of AI called reinforcement learning. The new AI, known as Reinforce, was a kind of long-term addiction machine. It was designed to maximize users' engagement over time by predicting which recommendations would expand their tastes and get them to watch not just one more video, but many more. Reinforcement was a huge success. In a talk at an AI conference in February, Min Chen, I think, a Google Brain researcher, said it was YouTube's most successful launch in 2 years. Site-wide views increased by nearly 1%, she said, a gain that at YouTube scale could amount to millions more hours of daily watch time and millions more dollars in advertising revenue per year. She added that the new algorithm was already starting to alter users' behavior. We can really lead to the users toward a different scale versus recommending content that is familiar, Ms. Chen said. After being shown a recording of Ms. Chen's talk, a YouTube spokesman confirmed that the company had incorporated reinforcement learning in its recommendation system. But he disputed her claim that it was YouTube's most successful change in 2 years. He added that reinforcement learning was meant to make recommendations more accurate by neutralizing the system's bias towards popular content. Good thing. But YouTube's changes again played into the hands of the far-right creators, many of whom already specialized in creating videos that introduced viewers to new ideas. They knew that a video calling out left-wing bias in Star Wars The Force Awakens might red pill movie buffs, or that a gamer who ranted about feminism while streaming his Call of Duty games might awaken other politically minded gamers. That is something that, I think people have known for a while. The idea that, and that's something I keep in mind, that like if you talk about something that isn't necessarily political, but you make it political, so again, movie reviews and that's going to attract a certain audience of not just people that are interested in politics, but people that don't even know they're interested and might be, that have never heard of this before, but they find it through video reviews, and they're like, oh, this is something new, this is something interesting. More Molyneux. YouTube's recommendation system is not set in stone. The company makes many small changes every year and has already introduced a version of its algorithm that is switched on after major news events to promote videos from authoritative sources over conspiracy theories and partisan content. Which is, basically to say that they're going to promote official news sources like ABC, CNN, MSNBC, Fox, all those kind of things over like the alternative media. This past week, the company announced that it would expand that approach so that a person who had watched a series of conspiracy theory videos would be nudged towards videos from more authoritative news sources. It also said that a January change to its algorithm to reduce the spread of so-called borderline videos had resulted in significantly less traffic to those videos. And that is honestly something that just rubs me the wrong way. I'm worried about that, where YouTube is providing a platform and then they take the approach of, okay, well, there are certain videos we don't want people to see. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist either. There are very few conspiracies that I believe in that I think are like completely true. They're like, I went through a conspiracy phase when I was younger, and since then, like, there's still some stuff. There's still some interesting stuff there that's worth questioning. And that's why I have nothing against people that question that stuff. Good for them. Do it. Question the stuff. Really look into the data. But I'm not even a fan. Like, I don't think most of these conspiracy theories are true. Like, at least more of the popular ones, I guess. Like the moon landing is fake stuff. But at the same time, I don't want that stuff reduced. Like, even the flat earther stuff, I guess, is technically a conspiracy theory. But I don't want that stuff blocked. I think it's hilarious. And Google even mentioned that in their official announcement, that like they mentioned flat earth videos, which is hilarious. In interviews, YouTube officials denied that the recommendation algorithm steered users toward more extreme content. The company's internal testing, they said, had found just the opposite, that YouTubers who watch one extreme video are, on average, recommended videos that reflect more moderate viewpoints. The officials declined to share this data or give any specific examples of users who were shown more moderate videos after watching more extreme videos. I think that's just YouTube, honestly. Like, if you watch videos by Jared Taylor, for example, like someone who is genuinely, like, pretty radical, there aren't that many other radical people. There are certainly. Like, he's not the only one, but there aren't that many other radical videos. And there's a lot more people talking about the same things he talks about that aren't as radical, that are more part of, like, just the alt media, like, anti-establishment right kind of group. And I think that's just what's going to happen. When there are more videos talking about his kind of stuff but are less radical, you're going to get those videos more often because there's more of them. The official stressed, however, that YouTube realized it had a responsibility to combat misinformation and extreme content. Again, do they really have that responsibility? Because I don't want them getting involved. I don't think they can handle that. While we made good progress, our work here is not done, and we will continue making more improvements this year. A YouTube spokesman, Farshad Shadlu, said in a statement, "I'm sorry, Farshad, if I completely butchered your name and made it sound insulting. Or if my pronunciation was insulting. By the night of November 8th, 2016, that is election night for those that don't remember in the U.S., Mr. Kane's transformation was complete. He spent much of the night watching clips of Miss Clinton's supporters crying after the election was called in Mr. Trump's favor. His YouTube viewing history shows that at 1:41 a.m., just before bed, he turned on a live stream hosted by Mr. Crowder with the title "Trump Wins." I'll admit that I don't think I actually watched any YouTube the night of the election. I was with friends, like, jumping back and forth between MSNBC, CNN, and Fox, just back through the three, and just talking with. I went back and watched some of the live streams, because some of those were really hilarious, but I didn't watch anything that night. That year, Mr. Kane's YouTube consumption had skyrocketed. He got a job packing boxes at a furniture warehouse where he would listen to podcasts and watch videos by his favorite YouTube creators all day. Does his boss know he's doing that? I'm just kidding. He fell asleep to YouTube videos that night, his phone propped up on a pillow. In all, he watched nearly 4,000 YouTube videos in 2016. Holy moly. More than double the number he had watched the previous year. That's a lot of YouTube. Not all of these videos were political. Mr. Kane's viewing history shows that he sought out videos about his other interests, including cars, music, and cryptocurrency trading. I mean, you got me on the cryptocurrency trading. But the bulk of his media diet came from far-right channels. That is a false statement. And it's just based on the term far-right. And after the election, he began exploring a part of YouTube with a darker, more radical group of creators. Here's the plot twist part. These people didn't couch their racist and anti-Semitic views in sarcastic memes, and they didn't speak in dog whistles. Interesting, because that kind of implies that the people he was watching before did couch their racist and anti-Semitic views in sarcastic memes, and I would say that's wrong, that's dumb. These people were not racist or anti-Semitic. It's you're getting paranoid if you're seeing stuff that isn't really there. One channel run by Jared Taylor, who I've already mentioned. The editor of the white nationalist magazine American Renaissance posted videos with titles like Refugee Invasion is European Suicide, which, and is that a racist title? I guess it can be construed as racist. And again, this is Jared Taylor, so I'm not denying. The guy is a white nationalist. But, I don't know, the title just doesn't seem like, that seems like something that Douglas Murray would say. Others posted clips of interviews with white supremacists like Richard Spencer and David Duke. Mr. Kane never bought into the far-right's most extreme views, like Holocaust denial or the need for a white ethno-state, he said. Still, far-right ideology bled into his daily life. He began referring to himself as a tradcon, a traditional conservative, committed to old-fashioned gender norms. He dated an evangelical Christian woman, and he fought with his liberal friends. I think this is really hilarious. This thing was something that really stood out to me the first time I read it. Mr. Kane never bought into the far-right's most extreme views. So, what we're saying is, this guy watched all this YouTube content, but never actually became far-right. He never got into the alt-right stuff. Or actually, they even said he watched the alt-right stuff, but he never bought into it. Still, far-right ideology bled into his daily life. So, far-right ideology is calling yourself a traditional conservative, apparently. I'm committed to old-fashioned gender norms, which depends what you mean. Like, it is a more radical view to say, okay, I believe in old-fashioned gender norms, which means women shouldn't have the right to vote. They also shouldn't get a job. But then the most people I know that refer to themselves as tradcons are just like, yeah, getting married is a good thing. Having kids is a good thing if you want kids. If you're a woman and you want to stay at home with the kids, and that's a good thing. You don't have to have a career if you don't want one. Got anything? You can't juggle both at once. Like, these aren't radical, extreme, far-right views. These are rather mainstream. He dated an evangelical Christian woman. How far-right of him? He dated a Christian woman. And he fought with his liberal friends. Again, how awful. It was kind of sad, said Zelda Watt, a friend of Mr. Kane's from high school. I was just like, wow, what happened? How did you get this way? Some of Mr. Kane's favorite YouTube creators were shifting their politics too. Mr. Molyneux in particular seemed to be veering further to the right. He fixated on race realism, a favorite topic of white nationalists, and went on an InfoWars show to discuss his opposition to multiculturalism with Mr. Jones. He hosted far-right figures on his channel, including Mr. Taylor of American Renaissance and Brittany Pettibone, a self-described American nationalist who pushed the Pizzagate conspiracy theory. I can't say much about Brittany Pettibone. I don't know if she's far-right. I don't know much of her content. She doesn't seem like it. I watched that interview, and she didn't seem radical. At least the topics they were talking about wasn't radical. I think she was just promoting her book. And honestly, this thing about Mr. Molyneux is actually correct, in my view. Like, it's, to be honest, whether you like it or not, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing is up to you to decide. But he has definitely veered further to the right, as I said at the beginning of this video. As Mr. Molyneux promoted white nationalists, again, promoted maybe is a bit of a strong word, more like platformed, which I see as kind of promotion, but I would consider it different. His YouTube channel kept growing. He now has more than 900,000 subscribers, and his videos have been watched nearly 300 million times. Last year, he and Miss Southern, Mr. Kane's Fashy Bay, that's still just embarrassing, dude, went on a joint speaking tour in Australia and New Zealand where they criticized Islam and discussed what they saw as the dangers of non-white immigration. Did they really say that? Were they complaining about non-white immigration? I thought they were just complaining about, like, mass immigration from third world countries. Which, I mean, granted, like, it's more that, like, yes, are they criticizing the mass immigration of people who are non-white? It's like, yes, but are they really criticizing because they're non-white? Or because they have different cultural beliefs? Because it's like, you can't bring in all these people all at once from different cultures. I think that's what that was. In March, after a white nationalist gunman killed 50 Muslims in a pair of mosques in Christchurch, New Zealand, Mr. Molyneux and Miss Southern distanced themselves from the violence, calling the killer a left-wing eco-terrorist. Did they call him left-wing? I'm not familiar. I honestly haven't watched their stuff about that, I don't think. But they did, if they did call him a left-wing eco-terrorist, I just want to point out that the eco-terrorist is in quotes, but the left-wing part isn't in quotes, so... but the eco-terrorist is correct. Like, he does call himself an eco-fascist, which is interesting. And, I mean, I imagine their argument was he's a self-described eco-fascist. Fascism is left-wing. That's what I imagine their argument was. Again, not judging their argument specifically, but I think that's probably what they argued. And saying that linking the shooter to far-right speech was utter insanity. I don't think they were saying that. I think they were saying linking the shooter to their speech was insanity. And they're correct on that. To say that he was radicalized, like the guy even writes in his manifesto that radicalizing him, that the thing that radicalized him was visiting France, which is both like morbidly hilarious, but also absolutely disturbing. They're like, yeah, how'd you become radicalized? I visited France. Like, why'd you think to commit a shooting? I visited France, and that inspired me. Just neither Mr. Molyneux nor Miss Southern replied to a request for comment. How surprising, because why would they do that? The day after my request, Mr. Molyneux uploaded a video titled An Open Letter to Corporate Reporters, in which he denied promoting hatred or violence and said labeling him an extremist was just a way of slandering ideas without having to engage with the content of those ideas. Yeah, the idea that he's promoting hatred or violence is just false. Like, it's so tiring. It's so wrong, it's tiring. As social media platforms have barred far-right activists for hate speech, harassment, and other harmful conduct, Mr. Molyneux and Miss Southern have become vocal free speech advocates who denounce what they call excessive censorship by social media companies. If you ban or crush people's lawful speech, it's like a rattlesnake, Mr. Molyneux said in a video. You cut off the rattle, but you don't cut off the head. In 2018, nearly 4 years... I'm going to try to keep this video below an hour. We'll see what happens. I guess you can see now if I succeeded or failed. We're almost done. In 2018, nearly 4 years after Mr. McCain had begun watching far-right... Mr. Kane had begun watching far-right... right-wing... watching far... I don't know why I want to say far there. There is no far there. Watching right-wing YouTube videos, a new kind of video began appearing in his recommendations. These videos were made by left-wing creators, but they mimicked the aesthetics of right-wing YouTube, down to the combative titles and the mocking use of terms like triggered and snowflake. And right there is ContraPoints. And that is something to give them credit for. Like, they've noticed how the alt-right or not the right, just the alt-right, but the alternative media has this kind of like coolness factor to it. It's like, yeah, we're radical, we share memes, we're having fun with our ideas. We're not just complaining, but we're actually like we're having fun doing it. We're discussing ideas and having great conversations, and we're enjoying it. And it seems like this new group of left-wing commentators have understood that. They understand that, and they're responding to it with their in their own kind of manner. One video was a debate about immigration between Miss Southern and Steve Bonnell, a liberal YouTuber known as Destiny. Destiny to me is insufferable. I mean, I honestly can't watch. I tried watching him. He's just insufferable, in my opinion. Mr. Kane watched the video to cheer on Miss Southern, but Mr. Bonnell was a better debater, and Mr. Kane reluctantly declared him the winner. Mr. Kane also found videos by Natalie Wynn, a former academic philosopher who goes by the name ContraPoints. Ms. Wynn wore elaborate costumes and did drag-style performances in which she explained why Western culture wasn't under attack from immigrants, or why race was a social construct. Unlike most progressives Mr. Kane had seen on the right, Mr. Bonnell and Miss Wynn were funny and engaging. They spoke the native language of YouTube, and they didn't get outraged by far-right ideas. Instead, they rolled their eyes at them and made them seem shallow and unsophisticated. Interesting! A rather interesting way of approaching these ideas. If you find ideas that you find crazy, that you think are ridiculous, debunk them, make them seem dumb, like laugh at them, laugh at the sheer absurdity of them, and and debunk them, point out why they're wrong. And do it with a smile, do it with them in a comedic manner. Don't just go nuts and try to censor them. I noticed that right-wing people were taking these old-fashioned knee-jerk reactionary policies and packing them as edgy punk rock, Miss Wynn told me. One of my goals was to take the excitement out of it. When Mr. Kane first saw these videos, he dismissed them as left-wing propaganda, but he watched more, and he started to wonder if people like Miss Wynn had a point. Her videos persuasively used research and citations to rebut the right-wing talking points he had absorbed. I just kept watching more and more of that, sympathizing and empathizing with her and seeing that, wow, she really knows what she's talking about. Interesting that you can be sworn, you can be taken away from the right wing with arguments and ideas and not by censorship. Who would have thought? I just kept watching more and more content. Oh, I already read that. Miss Wynn and Mr. Bonnell are part of a new group of YouTubers who are trying to build a counterweight to YouTube's far-right flank. This group calls itself BreadTube, a reference to the left-wing anarchist Peter Kropotkin's 1892 book, The Conquest of Bread. I have two videos. I have a 3-minute review on The Conquest of Bread, and then I have a video where I just wanted to keep talking about it, and I ranted on it for a good 15 minutes, I think, because it was by far the worst book I ever read. I was majorly disappointed. I expected good things and was disappointed. But but yeah, besides that, that's just me ranting about and pointing out a video of another rant. It also includes people like Oliver Thorne, a British philosopher who hosts the channel PhilosophyTube, or where he posts videos about topics like transphobia, racism, and Marxist economics. Contradiction in terms if I've ever heard one. The core of BreadTube's strategy is a kind of algorithmic hijacking by talking about many of the same topics that far-right creators do, and in some cases by responding directly to their videos. Left-wing YouTubers are able to get their videos recommended to the same audience. Natalie and Destiny made a bridge over to my side, Mr. Kane said, and it was interesting and compelling enough that I walked across it. BreadTube is still small, Miss Wynn. The most prominent figure, has 615,000 subscribers, which is actually, I didn't know she was that big. I thought she was in the 200,000 range, so good for her, honestly. Unfortunately, the alt-right got a big head start on finding ways to appeal to white men, said American Johnson. That's an interesting name. A YouTuber who runs a left-wing channel called Non-Compete. We're late to the party, but I think we will build a narrative that will stand strong against the alt-right narrative. And good for them, honestly. I want this alternative left-wing media group to rise up. I want them to put CNN and MSNBC out of business. I want the future of media to be this BreadTube versus the alternative media on the right. After the New Zealand shooting, Mr. Kane decided to try to help. He recently started his own YouTube channel, Faraday Speaks, a homage to the 19th century scientist Michael Faraday, where he talks about politics and current events from a left-wing perspective. He wants to show young men a way of the far right before white nationalist violence ensues. You have to reach people on their level, and part of that is edgy humor, edgy memes, he said. You have to empathize with them, and then you have to give them the space to get all these ideas out of their head. Shortly after his first video was uploaded, Mr. Kane began receiving threats from alt-right trolls on 4chan. One called him a traitor and made a reference to hanging him. That was when he bought the gun. We finally get back to the gun, mentioned at the beginning of the article. Several weeks ago, he moved out of West Virginia and is working at a new job while he develops his YouTube channel. What is most surprising about Mr. Kane's new life on the surface is how similar it is to his old one. He still watches dozens of YouTube videos and every day and hangs on the words of his favorite creators. It is still difficult at times to tell where the YouTube algorithm stops and his personality begins. It's interesting how it does shift kind of to a YouTube addiction, which is worth bringing up, sure. Perhaps they shouldn't be surprised. Our political culture is now built largely on shape-shifting internet platforms. I am going to rush through this because the end's not as important. Near the end of our interview, I told Mr. Kane that I found it odd that he successfully climbed out of a right-wing YouTube rabbit hole only to jump into a left-wing one. I asked if he considered cutting back on his video intake altogether and rebuild some of his offline relationships, aka go outside. He hesitated and looked slightly confused. For all of its problems, he said YouTube is still where the political battles are fought and won. Leaving the platform would essentially mean abandoning the debate. He conceded, though, that he needed to think critically about the videos he watched, which is interesting. That's actually an interesting thing he brought up where the interviewer is like, have you ever thought going back out into the real world, maybe spending less time watching YouTube videos? And she meant that as more just do normal everyday things, talk to your friends and that. And he took it as, he took it as her asking or him asking, I'm not even sure who wrote the article. Okay, it looks like Kevin Roos, I guess. But he took it as should you do politics in real life rather than politics online, which is just interesting how he kind of misinterpreted his question. He conceded, though, that he needed to think critically about the videos he watched. YouTube is the place to put out a message, he said, but I've learned now that you can't go to YouTube and think that you're getting some kind of education because you're not. I mean, when you watch YouTube videos, you can learn a lot from YouTube, honestly, and not just politics, but in other stuff. You can learn a lot of informative stuff. It's just keep in mind that what you're learning from is a bunch of talk show hosts and people that are often just talking about that. You can't just be oh, I listened to a podcast, now I'm an expert. You can learn stuff, but it's kind of like a jumping off point that you might want to hear an interesting author talk and then buy their book or something like that. It should be a stepping stone, not an end in and of itself. But I think I made it before the hour mark, so let me know what you think in the comments section. Like the video if you enjoyed, subscribe for more. Again, let me know what you think in the comments, and thanks for watching.